Hey guys, welcome to the Creator Die podcast. I'm talking to Anand Ramcheron from South Africa. He is a comic book artist, illustrator from Cape Town,
Durban, actually.
Durban. Okay. And he's super talented, super dope, and I'm super excited to get into this combo. Uh, I found your work, I think, probably about a year ago or 2 years ago, and I just like it was when you were really going hard posting the stuff from your comic that you kickstarted, and so it was like these dope ass motorcycles, and I was like addicted to like seeing more. But yeah, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. First off, thanks for having me on the podcast, and thanks for the kind words. And likewise, man. When I found your account, I was blown away by the quality of the work. So, the
Oh,
feeling is
thank you.
very much mutual.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I did a little bit of internet stalking before this, and one thing I had to start with that I was just like super curious about is your education. Did you go to the Kubert School?
Yeah. Um,
Wow.
After high school, I think I was the class of like 2019, I think, at the
Okay.
Kubert School. So. Yeah, most of my comics knowledge and education definitely came from that institution. They really drilled into you what it means to be a comic book artist in the truest
hmm
sense of the medium. So I'm very
hmm
grateful for the education I received at the Kubert School.
Wow, man, that's sick. And were you physically like in New Jersey? Like you went down there and everything?
Yeah, I flew up uh, for the entirety of my studies. I was there for the 3 years, and yeah, I
Wow.
stayed in New Jersey. There was a residence offered by the school for like international students and regular students, and yeah, I crashed with some of the local guys for the 3 years and came back home afterwards.
Wow, dude, that's so sick. Like obviously I want to get into the craft and everything, but I know South Africa has such a distinct culture and vibe and everything, and in some ways New Jersey seems like the opposite of a lot of that. So culturally culturally, like what was that like, man?
Uh, you know, I honestly, if I didn't get to experience New Jersey to the extent I would have liked, maybe. Um,
Okay.
you see, one of the things the Kubert School does is it loads you with homework, and
Mm,
it's like it's the type of school that's like a boot camp. So it's
yeah.
you get 10 subjects a week, and I think about 7 or 8 of them are practical. Um,
Mm,
and then every week it's just rinse and repeat, 7 to 8 practicals, 7 to 8 practicals. And across the entirety of the time I'm there, even during the breaks, you get homework. So I didn't actually do much traveling or really get to see Jersey much. I went over to like, friends' houses and on field trips and stuff like that, but I never really did much um, in the US during my time that I was there.
wow. Had you been to the US before?
No, that was my first time.
Wow, man,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Yeah, that school is a historic school, and like a lot of people went through there. I even wanted to go through there when I was younger, and I think my mom was like made a big deal because I know, especially for Americans, like the accreditation thing can be kind of a big issue.
Yeah.
But like when you know the trade and the craft, like there's probably only a handful of places that'll give you a better or equal education. Like Kubert is like for comics is like world class. So yeah, man,
Yeah.
that's super dope. And so when you say practical, what could you break that down?
Practical meaning like physical drawing, not like a
Okay.
theory or like a,
Mm,
writing pages or essays. None of that stuff. Just pure drawing, non-stop drawing, just constantly. And you're drawing at school, you go home, you got to draw more. And they were pretty strict with the deadlines too. Like if you missed a deadline, it was an automatic minus 10% on the grade. So the longer
Wow.
it took, like just, the worse it can get. And it was, I think what the school was trying to do is it's doing its best to simulate what it could be like to be a working professional as a comic
Hmm.
book artist. Like these are the types of deadlines the pros deal with. And
Hmm.
I think it definitely made a lot of people scared about being in this industry. Um,
Hmm.
and we had a lot of students also leave the school as a result of the workload because it's so intense.
Wow.
So yeah, that's why I say it's like a boot camp. I don't think there's a better way to describe it.
Wow. I mean, that tends to be a common thread for people or for schools that really churn out people who can be professional when they get out is that boot
Mm.
camp vibe. I have some friends who went to like art center and they'll describe the same experience. Um,
Yeah, I think like
well,
one of the
oh,
things for me specifically was managing my time was the
mhm,
biggest uh, the biggest challenge. There were days where you know you go to school from about 8 a.m. You clock off at around 3 or 4 p.m. and then you have the rest of the day. And I noticed that during that time, like even meal times start to become stressful because it's like, man, how long
yeah,
can I afford to eat a meal for before I have to get back into these
yeah,
homework assignments? And it was quite a learning experience to realize that this is kind of what it means to juggle, professional work. And yeah, quite the learning experience.
yeah. Wow, man, that's really cool. And so, from where you were when you got in and where you came out after, what do you think? I mean, 3 years is a long time, so
Yeah.
it might be everything, but what were like the key things that you felt like you gained from it? Like, was it pure drawing, storytelling, overall?
I think, uh, you know, I learned a lot about the industry because I think that is what the school
Okay.
is definitely centered on. It teaches you how to, make a portfolio, how to tell a story,
Hmm.
and how to draw. And
Hmm.
one of the things the school did very well was it broke down a lot of bad habits that maybe a lot
Hmm.
of beginner artists might have when it comes to drawing. Um, and I think the biggest thing I can take away from that institution is that it taught me consistency. It taught me
Hmm.
how to do good work consistently without there being a severe drop in quality. And I think that
Hmm.
can only come from such an intense program, to learn it that quickly. Like they really in 3 years I managed to gain a sense of consistency, which I don't think is you know, easy to do for an artist by any means. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's definitely the biggest takeaway from that school.
And so, do you think like the fact that you were drawing so much that your baseline of like I'll give an example, like you're really really good at like vehicles perspective, like everything always works like in your images. Is that what you mean? Like I'm trying to formulate the question. My apologies.
No
Like
worries.
because you were drawing so much, every time you go to make your images, everything just works. Is that what you mean?
To an extent, yeah. We had a course or a class on basic drawing at the institution, and one of my lecturers, Giovanni Valletta, he worked for he did like X-Men. I think he did the John Wick books for a while.
Oh, okay.
He was pretty he was a pretty big name at the school, and to have him as a
Hmm.
teacher I was very grateful for that. But this he was just a wizard when it came to drawing technical things like vehicles and buildings, architecture, because I think he studied some of that, um, actual technical drawing. I think he had like some definitely a professional um, skill for that stuff. And when he taught us basic drawing, he drilled into us perspective and how to draw vehicles, the shapes we need to break down, and how to use ellipse guides and T squares and
Mm,
everything. He's very precise and technical. And then I think I actually had no prior experience with perspective drawing before this institution. Um,
mm.
uh, but they really drilled it into you, like from 1 point all the way to 3 point. They just make sure you know it. And I felt by the time I left, I kind of, I could grasp it and definitely add it to my skill set.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who looks at your work, like can see that's like one of the strong points is how everything that you make has such a like a volume and a realness to it, like the buildings and the vehicles and everything, like the characters feel like they're in a real world. And so it's cool that you went there and was able to get like such a key aspect of your work from that place. It means they're doing their job.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. Thanks so much
Yeah,
for
of
saying
course.
that. Yeah, I think
And then, oh, sorry, let you finish.
before we move on, I do want to add, like, the school taught me that comics is the type of industry that requires you to draw everything. I had a teacher that said you get paid to draw what nobody wants to draw. Um, and there's a lot of truth in that, because you might get, like, if you're drawing Batman, for example, you know, you got to learn to draw vehicles, buildings, citizens, gadgets, weapons, prisons, skyscrapers, gargoyles. Like, there's so many things that encompass a simple Batman comic that I think that almost gets overlooked sometimes when people say, "Oh, I want to be a comic book artist," or "I want to be an artist in general." It's just the visual library it
Yeah.
requires is actually quite extensive. So I think the school did a great job at making it clear that you have to learn how to draw these things that you might not particularly be strong at, but to get better at them over time.
Definitely. And if someone maybe doesn't have the chance to go to the Kubert School, but they're listening to this, how would you say if someone were to teach themselves that, like getting that visual library? Is it just going on Pinterest and Google and every day just drawing cars, drawing buildings, and just
I mean,
practicing?
the most I think you want to practice healthy studying, which is
Mm-hmm.
something I don't think it's spoken about a lot in the artist community.
Mm-hmm.
But you always want to study with intent. You don't want to just make an exact replica of what you're drawing. Uh, you want to get something out of it by the time the drawing is done. And
Mm-hmm.
the way you do that is, you just set a goal for yourself. So let's say, for example, I want to learn how to draw bikes, motorcycles. You know, ask yourself, what do I need to know first? You know, and start studying those elements first. So maybe just start with the wheels. Don't draw the whole bike. Just break it down. Start with the wheels. Maybe move on to the chassis. The body of the bike next, without the wheels. Just draw the body. Don't worry about the wheels. Maybe move on to I don't know the bike terminology, but the handle bar section. You know, I think once you start stripping these complex subject matter down to the bare bones and the simple shapes that go into making it, it starts to get simpler over time, because you would have studied everything in isolation. So when it comes time to put it all together, the information doesn't feel too, uh, scary. You kind of know that I've drawn a wheel before, I've drawn the body before, I've drawn the handles before. So you kind of know what you're doing when you get to that stuff. And I think that's just how I approach my studying in general when it comes to improving the visual library. I try not to overcomplicate my studies. I think over time I've definitely started to do more detailed and extensive studies, but that's after years of really just focusing on the basics and the simple things. Um, draw side views instead of three-quarter views of subject matter, because it's
Mm.
two-dimensional, it's not too difficult, things like that. Just simplify the study process as much as you can, I think.
So breaking each thing down to like the simplest forms and then slowly building it up from there.
100%.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely got to do that. Healthy studying. Keep that in mind. I'm taking notes for myself too because I'm trying to learn, man. Wow. Okay. And then let's talk about storytelling. Like, what would you recommend if someone wants to? Because comics is stories, and you have
Hmm.
to use those drawings to tell stories. How would you go start your path of learning storytelling?
You know, I think storytelling, in a sense, is more important than the art itself when it comes to comics. I think there's a high emphasis on the art side when it comes to comics, when there should be a clear distinction between that and the storytelling. Because you could be the best artist in the world for all I care, but to tell a story and have the viewer have little to no questions is actually incredibly difficult. The sense of clarity that goes into telling a story is, it has to be as clear as possible. And I think to learn storytelling, I think you just have to love stories enough. I think people who watch maybe a lot of movies and series, you know, I have like, I love watching movies in general. So what I tend to do is I'll make notes when I'm watching. So I'll be like, okay, so they're cutting from an establishing shot to like a mid shot and then to a close up. And I'm asking myself, what information are they trying to give me in these three panels? They're giving me the location, the overall location in the establishing shot, and then they're giving me the exact location in the mid shot. Maybe we'll be at the house. We'll start the establishing shot will be like the city or the neighborhood. The mid shot will be like the house, and then the close up will be maybe inside of the house, and we see like a family, you know, in the living room, for example. And I think, that it took them 3 frames to tell me all of that information. They couldn't do that in 1 frame. And I think basically storytelling is that it's making every frame count and making every frame give only the essential information. Nothing, no extra fluff needed. You just want to strip everything down to the bare bones of what it is and focus on that. I think that's the hardest part about storytelling, is simplifying, because we want to do so much when we draw, but we realize that a lot of this detail might not actually serve the story. And that was a tough lesson to learn, because I used to get criticized on my pages a lot because I had all this great drawing skill, but I wasn't prioritizing what the story was. I was prioritizing the drawings, and the story kind of gets lost in between all of that detail. So I think to learn storytelling, I think, watch movies, read comics, and, see how the artists and the filmmakers distribute their shots across the page. Make notes, ask yourself, what information is this page giving me? What information do I think it would help me that it doesn't have? Um, I think being critical towards these stories is the key to learning how to tell a good story.
Damn, bro. Preach. You really are good at this stuff, man. Like, you really know how to break this stuff down, distributing the information. Wow. Bro, that was fire. That was fire. That's like, do you,
Thanks.
I know you have a Colosso course. Are you thinking about doing more teaching?
I've been, a lot of people have asked me this question. Even locally, I've had schools like, would you like to teach this subject? Um, I think right now I'm in a space of I would like to one day. I'll say that much. I think right
Yeah,
now
that's fine.
I can't really make the time to be an effective teacher, but I think
Hmm.
when I have more free time and maybe I'm more open to more opportunities, work-wise,
Hmm.
I'll definitely consider it.
I feel it, man. You have like a really, really good way of breaking down and like answering questions. I would like, yeah, that was really good. So I had to ask because that
Thanks.
was such a good way of like breaking that subject down. And I have a million directions I want to keep going with the conversation. One that I skipped is where are you like from, like as a person that led you to being an artist? How does your background inform your career? Could you talk about like your early years and how it led to where you are today?
So I'm born and raised in Durban, South Africa. I live in a coastal town near the beach. Um, I went to a pretty nearby primary school and high school. Um, I pursued art in high school in grades 10 to 12. I took it as a subject. Um, and I think in those years, in those school years of mine, I did a couple subjects. I did like, I took physical science, I took life sciences, I took mathematics, and I definitely thought I was heading towards a more science-driven field with my studies. But I think around the end of grade 11, I don't know what happened to me. I actually had an injury that while I was playing sports at school that kind of made me bedridden for like a month. And in this
Wow.
time, I was, I couldn't do much, so I just started sketching like nonstop. And I realized in this month the amount of enjoyment I got out of like just doodling and sketching. It was just so much more fun to me than like the actual academic side of of school that I actually my grades started to suffer after that because I started to draw more and study less. And I'm not advocating anyone to do that by any means. Like work hard in school, study, and I think I just had a case of I didn't know what I wanted to pursue until that moment in my life. It was just like something clicked, and I was having a lot of fun drawing, but also my country doesn't have a lot of institutions to pursue a career in illustration. So when I got to my final year of high school and I had to start looking for colleges to apply to and universities, I didn't really want to pursue fine arts within the country, not for any particular reason, but I think my interest was definitely moving towards the more commercial side of illustration, comics, animation, uh, book illustrations, and stuff like that. And, I sent out an application to the Kubert School. I took 6 months after high school to prep like a portfolio for application. Um, Submitted it, got accepted, and, studied for the 3 years. I came out in 2019 and I started my career in freelancing. And I think in my early years, especially when I was in high school, there was something about drawing that made me happy, which I actually lost along the way while I was studying. You know, the sense of enjoyment I had back then just disappeared around my second year of college. And I started to almost hate this pursuit because of how intensive it was, learning perspective, learning how to draw vehicles, learning how to draw anatomy, learning how to draw expressions. All this stuff became brutal after a while. And, learning drawing techniques, learning how to ink, learning how to color digitally, all this stuff, it started to frustrate me. And in my third year, I told myself I'm going to pull back and kind of go back to my roots a little and just started drawing in a sketchbook again like I used to, because I actually realized that I stopped doing that. And I think that's what caused me to feel a bit lost within this field. And yeah, once I started filling out my sketchbooks again, like the mojo came back, the confidence came back, and yeah, I managed to uh, finish my studies with actually keen interest in pursuing it as a profession. So I would say that yeah, I'm grateful to my childlike nature of wanting to just sketch in a sketchbook, because I think that's the number one reason I'm doing this professionally is I do just like to draw.
I feel that. I think a lot of people who've gone through any type of program know that those foundational years at one point, I think you have to go through it, but
Yeah,
it can be so intense that you don't have any enjoyment. And I think that you probably have to do, you have to be that intense until you hit that kind of wall where you burn out, because then I think you're ready for the other stuff. I don't think you're always ready before that.
yeah.
So for you, when it was pulling back, like what were you drawing in your sketchbook? What are your roots that made you happy again?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I would sketch a lot of, things I was interested in. So maybe video games I played. Um, I'm thinking, you know, Devil May Cry, uh, animes I've watched, Bleach, Naruto, you know, just anything that I was really into as a teen. I would sketch that stuff, but I would a lot of the times copy, just pictures I saw on the internet, um, or whatever, or like pictures out of the manga, or the comics. And one day my brother, I would show him these pictures, and he would always be the least impressed, like with what I did, and I'd always wonder why. And he said it's because it's not original. And then I
Mm-hmm.
was like, interesting. And he kind of, that comment stuck with me ever since. I kind of definitely fell off on doing like fan art type illustrations. I do it now and then, but
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I realized that, yeah, maybe I should be a more original type of illustrator and do my own characters and illustrations without being dependent on these other franchises for my work. And I think he definitely set me on a path to just want to be more original with my work. So as time
Yeah.
progressed, my sketchbooks got more filled up with just studies from life instead of copying these characters from these games and things like that. And I think that definitely lends itself to just becoming a stronger illustrator. It's just once you can communicate life effectively into your work, I think it starts to feel literally more alive and relatable. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. I feel that. I understand. And like just breaking it down, so like pulling back, going back to stories and things that you liked and drawing from life kind of rekindled your love of making art.
Yeah.
Nice. And then, you know, you said that Kubert School had a heavy focus on teaching you about the industry. And one thing I think is super interesting about your career, and I thought it even when I first started seeing your work, was you always seem to be very independent. And you went, like, I know you've done work for studios like including Golden Wolf, and I know you've done a project with Marvel, but it's crazy to me that like damn near right after you got out of school, you launched a Kickstarter and you started moving on creating your own stuff. So can you talk about that? Because you don't seem to me like a person who's trying to get into anyone else's like thing. You seem like you're on a mission to create your own brand and world, and I think that's super dope.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'd say that I definitely lean towards that side of the creative aspect of my work. I do want to just, I've always wanted to create my own, comic ever since I was a kid. So that's definitely what I'm working towards. With regards to the Kickstarter, um, I was approached by a man named John Gator, who is the writer of the book we launched, Infinity Runners.
Mhm.
He emailed me because someone that I went to the Kubert School with, Emma Kubert, who is actually the daughter of Andy Kubert. She was a year ahead
Oh
of me.
wow.
Yeah, and I think John is a family friend of theirs. And yeah, he sent me an email after Emma recommended my name to him for the project Infinity Runners. And yeah, he reached out. He gave me the pitch for his project, and at the time, I have not at this point. I haven't even illustrated a full comic book yet. This would be my first comic project out straight after college, and yeah, I was very excited, but very very terrified because of the subject matter. Um,
Mm.
and I realized that. John was very passionate about the book. He gave me ample time to prepare myself for it. We took, I think, a whole year to do like concept work and for me to learn how to draw motorcycles and things like that. And then, yeah, we hit the ground running like maybe a year after that. And it was scary because I hadn't launched a Kickstarter before. It was my first time ever putting a product out. And I was amazed to see the support for the book. I think we raised over, around $15,000 for the project, which I was ecstatic with. I couldn't believe the amount of support that came through for that book. Just to this day, you know, just I can't believe that people want to buy my work by any means. It's just an incredible feeling. And yeah, we didn't expect it to be as successful as it was. And even now, people are requesting like, "Yo, we missed the Kickstarter. Can we get like, are you putting up a Shopify? Can we get it somewhere else?" Things like this. So I think over time, hopefully, we can build this into something special. But as of right now,
Mhm.
it is very minimal. It's bare bones. It's literally just been printed, and
Mhm.
it'll be sent out to all of the backers within the next week or two.
Nice.
Yeah,
Man, that's so cool. And I didn't realize. I know there was like, because I was stocking all of the stuff with Infinity Runners, and I know there was like a heavy amount of concept design,
yeah,
and but I didn't understand that you kind of had that lead time to prep and practice to be able to attack it, because when you look at it, it seems like this is your wheelhouse. Like you were born to make Infinity Runners, because
wow.
I mean, it to me that was like the craziest thing. It was just like so good.
Thank you, man. I think I've always been inspired by, artists that I felt could almost draw anything you gave to them. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, uh, Katsuhiro Otomo is a good example. The Akira
Mhm.
guy, like I looked at his illustrations outside of the Akira comics, and this, like the guy's attention to his observation skills and perspective and all of this stuff is so good. I felt like, man, like you could give this guy anything, and he could probably whip it
Yeah.
out, pretty successfully. And I think tackling your weaknesses as an artist overall is the most important part about the process. As good as at the end of the day, you will get hired based on your strengths. That goes for any field.
Mhm.
People will hire you for what you are good at. But,
Mhm.
to address your weaknesses and turn those into strengths as well, that only amplifies your opportunities. And I think you don't know what the outcome of that can be, like where that can actually land you
Yeah.
work wise. And it landed me at Infinity Runners, which, and this book actually put my work on the map. Like you said, that's how you discovered it. Um, that's how Marvel, I think, reached out. They saw the concept work that I did for that book, and they sent me an email to do work for trading cards that they were designing. And not too, literally a year after that, I managed to land the gig with Sony Pictures Animation with the big movie
Yeah,
Spider-Verse. And I like to think of Infinity Run as definitely put my work on a scale that got it recognized by the bigger companies.
for sure. I mean, the work is so good, and like even like when you look at it, like to see that you were like starting your career in 2019, which is not that long ago, like at all. Like it just everything. It looks like you should be in like your mid 30s. Like the type of work that you're putting out is just like so crazy. It's so good. And so I'm not surprised. I'm sure people who reach out to you think you're like super vet and like been
Yeah,
in the industry for super
for
super
sure.
long, and yeah, I mean, it's a testament to everything you put in. And yeah, I just thought it was super cool, and I think it's also really cool how you didn't just wait also for other opportunities, because you're heavy on social, you're everywhere, like you're on Twitter, you're on Instagram, you're always posting new sketches, you're always posting new concepts, you got pages, you got a course. Like I think your career is like a model of what I think you have to be nowadays as an artist. If you want to be successful long term, you can never just do your job. Like you have to be building other things. And that was another thing I thought was interesting, was how you're building a brand, you're building things outside of the work so that people have so many different ways to interact with you as an artist.
Yeah, social media is it's not something I'm a big fan of, if I'm being honest. Like it's like the ultimate killer of productivity for me. I tend to like it's very addictive and it gets you very distracted, I think. And I've had a problem with social media for many years, but then I realized as an artist in today's industry, it's like the most essential part about being, in the industry. It's making sure you do like relative um not relative, but you're doing work that people can see, and you got to
Yeah.
post it, you got to share, and you got to, you know, I just never realized how important it would be to put your work out there when I started
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Nowadays it feels like, you got accounts that are posting every day. You got accounts that are
Yeah.
posting, once a week. You got accounts that post once a month. And I don't think there's a formula, to be
Yeah.
successful on social media by any means. I think as long as the work's good and you
Yeah.
share it, that's
Yeah.
what counts. But yeah, I definitely think I would like to one day, hopefully, not need to post as frequently as I do, because I do
Mm.
feel like there is a sense of dependency on these platforms to get work.
Yeah.
So I constantly
Yeah.
feel like I have to share what I'm doing.
Most definitely. And one thing I wanted to ask, you have a very good split between finished work, sketches, sketchbook like stuff, as well as like work in progress. Was it ever hard for you to overcome like the feeling that you need to only post finished work? Because I like the fact that you post such a different range. Like, was that something you had to overcome?
I when I was a student at college, I posted everything I did, like whips, sketches, finished pieces,
Hmm.
and was, I was passionate about just sharing my work at the time because I was regarded as a good student by some of my teachers. They were very impressed with my work when I was in college. So I always felt a
Hmm.
bit, I felt a sense of confidence putting that stuff online. And then I think when I first started getting like professionals looking at my account and following, I started to get a
Yeah.
bit like, I was like, oh, I got to impress these people now.
Yeah.
And I stopped posting whips and sketches, and I just posted finished pieces after that. And I've never been the type of artist that, as much as the finished piece is impressive, for me, I find most of my joy in the process. And not sharing the
Mm.
process felt very dishonest to me as an artist because I think that's
Mm.
where I thrive the most is and have the most fun. It's as I'm building it. And that's why I post, the more loose sketches now and the whips. I think it took me about 2 or 3 years to come out of that shell again to actually be confident
Mm.
enough to post it. I also think I could be maybe just following the wrong accounts, but I actually, there's not there seems to be a lack of posting of whips and things like that. And I think it's not
Yeah.
too great for like aspiring artists to see those accounts and, always feel the pressure to share the absolute best thing they've ever made. I think,
Yeah.
they should be able to any aspiring artist should feel confident to just post a sketch and not feel like, oh, it's not a finished piece and I shouldn't post it, you know.
Yeah. Uh, I totally agree with you. I'm definitely in my shell when it comes to that. And it's something that it's like a thing that I don't personally feel good about, like only posting the finals because, but I also feel so like afraid that if people don't understand that this is going somewhere else, that I'll be prejudged
Yeah,
and people will be like, oh, this guy is not very talented. So I'm like, but it's like an insecurity thing you have to overcome
I
to,
agree. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I
man.
think
And
that
it only makes,
insecurity, go ahead.
oh, I was just saying, it only makes everyone better to understand that there is a process in creating art. It doesn't just appear.
Yeah, I think, the insecurity for me has, in a sense, died off because
Mm,
I realized that there's a reason people don't show the whips. It's because there's a sense of, maybe vulnerability or they're being open to
hmm.
being criticized because the piece isn't done yet, and I felt like, if this is something everyone feels, then it wouldn't hurt to, share that stuff because I don't think people are actually that judgmental at the end of
Yeah.
the day. You know,
Hmm.
um, Also, I think whips in general, uh, if you, it's a great way to just milk a post, milk content. It's
Yeah.
you don't need. I think putting the pressure on yourself to always make finished pieces
Yeah.
might actually make making art feel a bit more dreadful because I feel like then you're
Yeah.
only prioritizing the final product, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think to conclude this section is people should feel confident enough in their ability to sketch and to share pieces of their progress because any artist out there needs to know the truth about the process and what goes into making these great pieces, without necessarily needing to pay for it. Like
Yeah.
I feel like this is something that we should be kind enough to share and help people grow with. So yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Well, I'm using this as a timestamp. I'm gonna stop holding back. So I want to be more
All
like
right.
you.
Sounds like a
For
plan.
sure. Yeah. And are you good on time right now?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Cause I interviewed my last interview was with Crom, and I didn't get to this part, but I love talking to comic book people because I love comics. And so I wanted to kind of nerd out on like what are you reading? What are some of the stories and books that like are your shit? Like what's like the most impactful stuff to you and what are you enjoying right now?
Um, I recently purchased. Uh, Let me get his name real quick.
All right.
Uh, Tetsuro Kasahara's Atom books. Like I've been reading these lately. Uh, I love the guy's stuff. He's really phenomenal artist, but it's in the vein of Astro Boy and things like that. So it has this very classic feel, and yeah, that's probably what I'm reading currently. But books that inspired me growing up would definitely be uh, Bleach of all things. I grew up on Bleach. It was very impactful in my early years, and I loved um, Tite Kubo's work. I think
Mm-hmm.
the way he uses black on a page is like no other artist I've
Mm-hmm.
seen. He literally just throws flat black without any rendering, and he still makes it work. There's just a sense of like fearlessness with him that I
Yeah.
just to this day am still impressed by. But I haven't read much in recent years.
Mm.
I feel as though I need to really squeeze the time in to read things,
Yeah.
which does suck because I do have like a huge backlog of books that I want to check out. But I haven't read any Western comics in a minute, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest. I haven't. The last thing I read was like Super Sons, and that came out like 2017, I want to say, or 2018.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm way behind.
I feel you. I mean, Super Sons was hard to pass up. Like that Jorge Jimenez run was
Yeah,
like I like his stuff when he's drawing adults, but something about when he was trying to do that more youthful style, everything had a level of appeal that kind of gets lost sometimes in the more like gritty shit that he does. But
yeah,
that Super Sons was like, wow, I loved it. I'm with you.
yeah. Same.
Oh
I think
man.
other mangas I love, Vagabond for sure.
Mm. Hmm.
Big fan of that. I'm a I don't want to say I'm a philosophy nut, but I do draw a lot of parallels with like the art process and being a warrior in a sense.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
books like that give me a sense of they almost make us feel very purposeful and show me that it's worth it, just by
Yeah.
being consistent and keeping at it. So, yeah, Vagabond's up there for sure.
Yeah, I gotta dive deeper into that. I've read a little bit, not a lot, but I've watched like endless YouTube documentaries talking about like the philosophy of it and how Takahiko, the artist, like
Hmm.
because I guess he's very like he talks a lot about how that philosophy relates to his own process. And so there's a lot of like info out there about how he's talking about Masashi in the book, but in some ways it seems like he's talking about himself and his own philosophy towards art and excellence. And yeah, I just love the art on that book too, man. Like that's a
Yeah,
guy that seems like he's leaving it all on every fucking page, and it's insane.
yeah, no, agreed. Very
Um,
inspiring pages to look at, and I think he's one of the sometimes you always dread drawing too well in comics because you don't
yeah.
want people to get lost in the illustration and forget that
Hmm.
they're reading a book. But I
Hmm.
think that's one of the few books where it's seamless because the dialogue is so minimal. Uh,
Yeah.
it's easy to read, easy to look at. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that is crazy. The dynamic of, and it's a weird thing with commercial art because where like there is the if you explained it to someone who doesn't make art, it would sound stupid. But I think you could relate. There's always this feeling that you might make something too good or go too far, and I feel like a lot of times like there's always a certain level of like holding back when you make art. Like right now I'm on a kick of like Sean Gordon Murphy, and
Yeah,
he's another guy that I kind of feel like when I look at his page, I know there are shortcuts because you have to, but like it doesn't feel like he's taking any shortcuts with anything that he makes. It seems like he's maximizing everything, and it makes you look back at yourself and feel like how can I just like go all out the way like Vagabond does or Sean Gordon Murphy does? It's yeah, it's like a weird dynamic.
I think also with, guys like Sean Gordon Murphy, it's like he has so many decades of experience,
Yeah,
you know, that I feel to him it's effortless at this point, and it
yeah,
creates the illusion of like, oh, this guy spent so many hours on this page. But I think
yeah,
he's at a point where he's probably whooping these things out like it's, nobody's business. So I definitely think you have to have a point in your artistic career where you are giving it your all every
yeah,
time. And
yeah.
then over time, that slowly dies off. I think you start to see what's necessary, what's not, and you know where to cut corners and hold back. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're entering into a stage where you have enough experience to know what to pull back on?
I think I think I'm getting there. I think I do have too much detail in my work. I've always been trying to simplify. It's like a goal of mine, but I struggle. It's one of my biggest weaknesses as an illustrator is I struggle to hold back. And I've a good example is it's not out yet, but I'm doing a variant cover for an upcoming Power Rangers book,
Okay,
and I made it a I made it a mission of mine to be very minimal with the inking process. Like there's barely any
okay.
blacks on the cover, and
Wow.
I was, because I have to, if I can build the confidence to experiment a little with even my professional work, I think that's what keeps me excited to just draw and keep drawing and trying things. So I
Yeah.
think, after I just submitted the inks like literally this week and it was approved. And I was actually, it felt good knowing that, oh, they didn't expect me to do it in a specific style or have it done a certain way. They
Mm,
were actually very pleased with it. So I think you just got to take the risk sometimes and do the complete opposite of what you usually do and see how it pans out, you know?
wow. That's yeah, that's a really good point. You have to experiment. You have to try new stuff. And like you said, a lot of times having a goal for yourself, the style can come out of that goal. Like for you,
Yeah.
maybe going forward, you use less blacks, and it wasn't because you saw an artist using less blacks, but it's because you had a goal of removing some detail, and you might have the next stage and where your art goes. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think, experimentation for me is the best part about being an artist. It's there's so many mediums to work with. There's traditional, you can be a painter, you can ink work, you can work
Hmm.
digitally, you can use ZBrush, do 3D things. There's just so many ways for an artist to express themselves in today's world that I think not experimenting, you're depriving yourself of so much
Mm.
potential of what you could be. You don't want to be stuck in a box creatively. And I think for me that's the biggest goal is don't try not to put yourself in a box at the end of the day. You don't want to just be limited to this one way of seeing the world, you know. So definitely push the experimentation, try new things.
Wow, that's a really good point. And that was actually a question I wanted to ask you before when we were talking about education. Um, when you were at Kubert School, were you guys primarily working in digital? I mean, in traditional, and if so, how did you transition? Because I know you're huge with like Procreate, and you have a very like good way of making it work to where your work feels traditional, regardless. Like and so what was that transition, if there was a transition?
Yeah. The school did have a digital program for certain subjects. I think we had a class on digital production, so they had us use like at the time I had like a Wacom Intuos Pro, uh, and I actually really despised digital when I was at the Kubert school. I couldn't get used to these drawing tablets where you had to look at the computer screen when you draw.
Yeah.
Very jarring for me. So most of my Kubert years I was drawing traditionally. It wasn't until third year where I actually got the iPad Pro because I saw a lecturer of mine had it, and he was saying how much he prefers it over the Wacom, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And yes, I did a couple assignments on the iPad for school, and then I realized that it wasn't as good as my traditional work. So after I had finished my studies and came back home, I experimented more with the app, and over time tried my best to just move my traditional process over onto the digital side so that it feels a bit more fluid. But yeah, it did take a while to get used to, I won't lie. It took me at least like 6 months to get accustomed to it.
Would you ever see yourself doing a comic traditionally after having the
Yeah,
flexibility? Okay.
that is my goal actually. I am a bit frustrated at myself for going so into the digital side for so
Mm,
long because
okay.
at the end of the day, I still prefer pen on paper. Like me sketching in a sketchbook, I can't replicate that feeling digitally as much as I try.
Yeah.
But I realize for work purposes how convenient digital is that,
Yeah.
I realized I had to learn it. You just have to know it. So yeah, I definitely have plans to do more traditional work in the future, and I would absolutely love to do a full book traditionally in time.
Nice. Yeah. Those art sales are gonna go crazy, bro. You make like double the money off that. So that would be
Yeah,
dope too. Well,
agreed.
I had another question too because we've worked together on I think you've been on two projects at Golden Wolf, or was it just one?
Just the one.
Okay. But I'm curious because when I first started, actually, when I first started trying to get jobs in animation, I printed a comic and tried to use that as my portfolio. It didn't 100% work, but some people liked it. But now, in the last year or so, I've been trying to get back into making comics, and I've exclusively focused on working in animation and motion design, and I never really made the time. So I'm curious meeting someone like you who is managing to work with like the same studios that I do. How do you think about your career, dividing your time, projects when it comes to being able to balance something as intense as comics as well as like, working with Golden Wolf, which is like one of the best studios in the world?
That's actually, you know, I talk about this issue with my girlfriend a lot.
Hmm.
Like managing my time, and I realized that I my school did train me to juggle work. Like I say, like the Kubert School, like 7 to 8 practical subjects. You're juggling that every week. After a while, you have a better sense of what you can handle and what you can't. And I think
Hmm.
professionally, I've always tried to, when it comes to comics, I think the most important thing is consistency. So I try not to take any other jobs when I'm doing a comic book because it'll
Okay.
interrupt the whole flow of the whole process. So when I landed the Golden Wolf gig, I actually was free at that time. I didn't have any other projects going on. And then I had weekends free because I wasn't working on the weekends. So I said I can do my whatever other, if I was doing an illustration or a cover, I could just chip away at the weekends. But I also don't like being the type of artist that's overworked and doesn't have time
Yeah.
to like live a, a good life. I don't want to be behind the desk 24/7. That's
Yeah.
definitely not a goal of mine. And I've over time realized that I can output a really decent amount of work within 3 hours.
Hmm.
Um, I'm very productive in the first 3 hours I start working in the day. After the
Yeah.
third hour, I start to slow down. My work gets a bit sluggish, and I
Yeah.
realize I'm not as productive. And I've been using that as like I try to get 2, 3 hour sessions out of myself every day. Um, so for maximum productivity. So I'll work a total of around 6 hours. And I sometimes amaze myself at what I can get done in such a short time. Like
Yeah.
I've managed to whip out an entire, cover illustration within 4 days before, and just using just 6 hours a day kind of thing. So I think juggling work for me, it definitely worries me because I want to one day work on my own projects and have enough time to do those without being distracted. But
Yeah.
also with today's industry, I feel like you can't do your own projects without some form of clout or without people knowing you and willing to
Yeah.
support you.
Yeah.
So I'm caught between, trying to get my name out there, which means taking on as much work as possible. And I'm also caught between making my own work, which means not, being on social media and not sharing my work. So there's definitely a push and pull.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things about that I think at least now that I've kind of seen too is that a lot of times the only solution to this is like time and phases, because sometimes you might have 1 or 2 years where it's like super heavy on the commercial stuff, but it builds a certain amount of momentum in getting your name out there, especially as projects begin to come out, because a lot of times it takes a while for them to come out.
Yeah,
But I feel you because, yeah, it's a hard thing to balance, especially if you want to do your own thing, because you do have to put your name out there. But like, I think someone like you're definitely going to be on the path because even when you look at something like Infinity Racer, there was obviously the Kickstarter, but that thing is going to probably have a whole second lease on life when it gets to some form of mass publication. Like, say,
hmm
you get to do it through Image, because I'm sure people are going to find that book in like 5 years and think it just came out. And then you're going to have like even more people trying to find you and trying to see. I think you're probably the one of the best people in that position because I know projects have their own momentum that's like separate from you in the day-to-day grind because it'll come out way later.
that's
And
true. Yeah.
so yeah, so I think like you're probably going to be like way on track for that.
No, I appreciate that, man. You know, one thing I do want to stress on the topic of time is that I always make sure I don't draw on at least one day of the week. Um,
Okay.
not for any not because I hate drawing and anything like that, but I think it's almost like practicing a martial art or a sport or being an athlete. Like if you don't take a rest day, if you're a martial artist, your bones are like going to break eventually.
Yeah.
You're not giving your body enough time to heal. And I think for me, art is a similar approach. As much as the commercial industry demands work from its artists, I don't think the best work happens when you're just grinding yourself to death, working on a
Mhm.
project. I think, good work takes time. There's a great quote that's uh, I think his name is Lao Tzu. He's a Chinese philosopher. I could have butchered
Mhm.
that. I'm not sure, but the quote is, "Good rain knows when to fall," and
Mm.
I like that a lot. And I think that speaks a lot to my creative side. It's usually when I take a rest or when I get bored and do nothing that I actually get my best ideas. I think, and I think over the years when you're constantly working, you're depriving yourself of that opportunity to become bored or to, you
Yeah.
know, just think about what you want to make. And yeah, so every day, every week, I make sure I take a day off. And yeah, I'll make notes if I think of anything I'd like to illustrate and things like that. So I
You
think
know,
it's a healthy mindset.
I
Yeah.
100% agree, and I think that like that's one of those things that you hit, because me and you probably started around the same time. I think I got in and started working like a couple years after you, like 2021. But I think that when you start hitting a couple of years, there's like a minimal level of maturity that you start to get around that specific subject of taking time,
Yeah,
because that's one thing that I've started to learn by studying other people's careers is, like you said, the commercial industry kind of makes you feel like you have to crank stuff out every single day. But when you really start studying people's careers, a lot of people who have the success that we want to have when we're getting into the industry aren't people who necessarily let the industry dictate to them what the terms of their work is going to be. And it can feel entitled, it can feel spoiled if you try to explain that to people. But when you study people who have a lot of success, a lot of times they dictate their own terms, and they don't just take whatever or do whatever the industry tells them they have to do, or whatever they feel like. And something about being a little bit disagreeable or saying, no, I'm going to do it my way, ends up paying dividends in the long run, because a lot of times that's the only way you're going to be in alignment with how you work best, rather than trying to fit in whatever the paradigm is at that moment.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think like in my case, Infinity Run is a passion project that was it didn't have the shackles of the industry behind it. Um, just
Mm-hmm.
complete creative freedom, and it took me about,
Mm-hmm.
the book is like the first issue is about 48 pages. It took me like 4 months to draw that because of the amount of motorcycles and how challenging the book was. But I wouldn't have had that luxury if this was a monthly book. So
Yeah.
I think that's what enabled me to give it a lot of my best work at the time. And
Yeah.
I just think in general, if we could afford to give creatives more time, to
Yeah.
to do projects, we'd definitely be seeing a lot better projects being published out there. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Because like, I think you're younger than me, but like, so we weren't even born when Akira came out, and to
Yeah.
this day we will never know unless we decide to do deep research, like if any of the volumes or chapters of Akira came out late. Like, it's just fucking irrelevant to us. For the entirety of this project existing, we have no fucking idea if that book came out on time. We don't give a shit because it's done. And so it's like a
True.
lot of times that, like, these things that have so much importance in the moment, when the quality is there, a lot of times it doesn't matter. And it's not an excuse to not put out stuff on time or to be late, especially at work. Like, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, it just helps if you break it down for yourself to remember that these paradigms don't always aren't always what actually matters. And yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a point I think that you hit on that just got us riffing, but it was a good point.
Yeah. I think the key, at the end of the day is I mentioned it earlier, but don't let any as a creative, as an artist, the moment you limit yourself or the moment you
Mm,
place limitations on yourself, I think that's where you pretty much destroy what could have been. And
man.
yeah, the more time you spend on your projects, the more time you spend on just doing what you love doing, you know, the better. Like there's no need to rush. There's no need to like, the world isn't going anywhere. That's
Yeah.
just the reality of it. And I think, I had a life drawing course at the Kubert School. My lecturer, his name was Joel Tidy. But something he told me, which I still to this day I abide by his words. He kept telling me, "Slow down." He's like, "Just slow
Mm,
down." Um, And it's only when I really started to, it's only like maybe a year or two after graduating, I realized what he was saying.
Mm,
I was trying to just get to the end of this whole drawing or this process, but I'm allowed to like stop and take a break and come back and relax a little. And,
yeah,
every time I just remind myself of that, just slow down. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, man. My teacher, Peter Hahn, when I was living in LA, he's very prolific, and it was very shocking meeting him and having him teach you how much he had that same philosophy. I remember he was like saying, because he was talking about art center, he was saying it's such a boot camp that the kids will kill themselves during the term and then go on summer break and not draw for 3 months. And he's like, I'd
Mm,
rather you guys draw every single day at a sustainable level and never lose that desire to draw than burn yourself out. And that blew my mind. Yeah.
yeah, agreed. And I think, drawing for 8 to 9 hours a day is madness,
Hmm.
if you really think about it, because
Hmm.
to be that creative for that long, that's not easy.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I do think that is part and parcel of what kills a lot of people's passion. It's just the long
Yeah.
hours. And I think if you
Yeah.
can maintain a steady amount of hours every day that you can handle
Yeah.
effectively, and you just stick to that consistently, you'll actually be a lot more productive over time than
Yeah.
just doing 8 to 9 hours, 8 to 9 hours. Yeah,
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, man. Well, I think this episode has definitely been a banger. I hope the Riverside AI kicks out a lot of good clips because I feel like there was
sweet.
so many good things said. But just to see on like what note should we wrap up on? What are some things you would like people to know about you, or some lessons you feel like you can give, or any last words that you feel like you would like to say?
Wow. Damn. Let me think. So I want to, for any like aspiring artists who are listening, I think, you know, the most important thing in my process is sketching. I think don't stop
Mm,
sketching. Uh, if you're having a bad day in terms of creativity and you just burnt out, remember that you can always just sketch. You can sketch from reference so that you don't have to think too much. Um, and just remember that you're allowed to make mistakes, and that's what the sketchbook is there for. You just butcher as many drawings as you can and learn from those, and it'll pay off. I think that's something we don't stress enough because of how perfect art seems on social media. It's always
yeah,
polished, it's always pristine, but nah, butcher the hell out of your shit, man. That's all I can say. Like, that's definitely advice I wish I had taken sooner, because I was definitely a perfectionist when I started out. Yeah.
yeah. I was gonna ask you about that, and I mean, if you need to stop, let me know. But this was a good point because I feel like, as someone who follows you, I feel like I've seen you rediscover your sketchbook even recently. Is that like, you've been going hard with the blue line pencil and the inking, and I was telling you the other day, like I get those Olivier Copel vibes, and I was wondering, is that something you felt like you rediscovered recently, like getting back in your sketchbook and experimenting?
Yeah, you know, I love sketching, man, but these last 2 years for me have been so busy work-wise that I just could not
Uh-huh.
make time to like uh sit down with a sketchbook and fill it up like I used to. And it
Hmm.
frustrated me that all of my work was digital, so
Hmm.
this has been a sense, like you say, a sense of rediscovery. And yeah, it just reignites the passion to draw for me, because
Hmm.
that's where the I feel like that's where the soul is. It's on the page. That's where it is. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Damn, and I have to ask this because I think you have a very good way of articulating yourself. It seems like you have a lot of things that you're thinking about. There's a depth to you. Do you think that you're gonna get into writing? I know you wanted to make your own comic, but would it be something that you would write too? Like, is that a
yeah,
part of? Do you see yourself becoming a full cartoonist?
yeah, definitely. I would love to write, draw, and publish my own projects, but I understand that, it takes a while to get there, and I'm willing to give it the time. So,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely.
What subjects would you because this I'm always curious about this because we talked a bit about vagabond and philosophy and you referenced like even Lao Tzu. What type of ideas do you have? What topics do you think, themes do you think you would be putting in your work? I'm super curious.
Um, so I have one book that I'm working on, well, writing. I haven't done any illustration for it yet, but one of the
Hmm.
most important themes is, how can I put it? It's I think we live in a pretty, judgmental era, where people are quick to judge.
Hmm.
And
Definitely.
so this book explores somebody who basically basically you just imagine yourself being locked up in a room with everyone you've judged in your whole life,
Hmm.
and it explores just the, what could possibly come out of that. Would you learn something? Would you despise yourself for what you've done? Things like that. Um, that's definitely one of the themes. But philosophically speaking, I don't think that. I think I'm still trying to find my purpose of what or at least the purpose of the stories that I'm writing as I'm
Okay.
writing them. I don't think I know exactly what I'm doing just yet. I still think I'm figuring it out. But yeah,
I feel it.
yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see. And yeah, that's something I'm super obsessed with is understanding people's own personal philosophy and how they put that in your work. And I can't wait
In
to
terms of
see.
a personal philosophy that's not in my work, well, not
Uh huh.
well. I guess it does apply to my work, but my personal philosophy is to stay present.
I
Um,
feel it. Okay.
yeah, just kind of work with what you have. Don't you don't need to think about the finished product. You don't need to think about what you did yesterday. Just kind of whatever you're
Mm,
doing now. That's what counts. So stay present.
nice. I I think that is a perfect point for us to end on. A perfect piece of advice. Get in that sketchbook. Stay present. And yeah, don't stop making art. That's it.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah.